Welcome to this episode of Let's Chat. I'm your host, Chris Revel, coming from the Cat Cave in Warwick, Rhode Island. Let's Chat is a long-form conversational podcast where I, Chris Revel, seek out guests from the worlds of punk rock, podcasting, and pop culture. We've got really wonderful guests today of Alex from the Six Seasons and a movie podcast, which is pretty great because it's a podcast about pop culture, two of my favorite things, and I absolutely love the Six Seasons in a Movie podcast. I really like Alex. It was the first of the community podcast that I had found. And turns out that there's this wonderfully amazing community of community podcasters. And so many members of the people who made Community, from the creators, the writers, directors, and actors, and all that stuff, are a part of it. I mean, God, Alex has had Danny Pudi on. I was just listening to an episode he had recently with the Dean. Ken Jeong, it's incredible. It's so cool to see that the cast and the crew and everyone who made the show love it as much as what we as us community fans. So I definitely would say check out the community Discord as well. All that I found all that links we'll put in the show notes, but go to sixseasonsinapodcast.com or just follow Alex on Twitter, which is 6 Season Podcast with the number 6, and everything will be linked in there. But there's so many incredible community podcasts that I love and have gotten to meet and become friends with a lot of these wonderful people. It's been really cool. So big shout out to Alex. This is a really fun episode. We had done this a little while back, and I meant to get this out a little earlier. I had some health issues starting in November. It's now the 31st of January. So for the first time since the end of November, I finally feel healthy again. So I'm sure I'll get into that in later episodes. But so it feels good to feel good again. So I'm really happy about that. Anyway, let's just some quick housekeeping before we get into the episode. I just recorded a guest spot on one of my favorite podcasts, Defining Disney, which are fellow Let's Chat Club members. That should be out in March. And something I have nothing to do with, but I'm going to plug it anyway. Past guest of this show, Taylor Morden, who made The Last Blockbuster, which I absolutely love. As of today's recording, it just came out, I think, yesterday. He was on an episode of Let's Rewatch, which is also some past guests and friends of mine, and they talked about Clerks, which I still have never seen, but it was cool. It's a cool experience when you get into, like, your friends are becoming friends with each other, and you get to listen to it, and it was really cool. I had a lot of fun with that. Make sure you check us out on all the things at Let's Chat Podcast. I'm at Let's Chat Revel on Twitter, Instagram, and Clubhouse, which is one of my new favorite apps. You can catch me sometimes as a co-host on Let's Chat Live, which is on our Facebook YouTube channels, Tuesdays at 8 p.m., usually hosted by our producer Bree. And make sure, and for those, and also if you're not too familiar, we're going to be doing I also want to, we also add a couple more team members to Let's Chat team. Welcome Don from the Game On podcast, and Sonetta from the Friends of Streetlight Manifesto group is where we met. And please, hey, are you interested in joining our club? Because maybe you don't know what Let's Chat Club is, so let me give you a quick overview. This is something that we've been working on tirelessly over this last year, and we really have been having a lot of fun with it. So Let's Chat Club is an online community that empowers content creators, creatives to monetize their passion project while making connections in your industry. Let's Chat Club helps create, build, and strengthen their brands and build an infrastructure to succeed. We offer classes, networking opportunities, and have an array of aspects to help you with all your podcasting needs. So it's a paid membership, and hit us up or just check out letschatpodcast.net for more information. With that paid membership, you get various services we provide. We also give you access to our private Facebook and Discord groups, and we're going to be having some of our past guests in there too. We have some really cool stuff that's come out of it. That's where our recently Caroline from Defining Disney and I, and Nat and our other friend for Chip & Co. did the Let's Chat Presents Marvel Cinematic Universe. That was super fun. So a lot of stuff going on. Let'sChatPodcast.net for everything you need. And a huge shout out to the Vern for being our editor on this episode. You can make sure you follow him on Twitter, and he is available for hire. So, geez. Anyway, let's get to it. what's your entry point to Community? Were you watching it when it first aired?
I did. Yeah, I caught the show, the pilot. At least this is the apocryphal version that I tell myself. I'm pretty sure I did. I'm pretty sure I watched everything. Um, where I don't give myself bonus points is that I know that I switched over to either watching ripped versions of the episodes. Like, they'd come out and then I'd get an episode like, a week later, that kind of thing. So I didn't
Mhm.
watch for most of the first season, whatever, and on. I wasn't watching like live on Thursday nights. So
Yeah.
I'm an early fan, an early adopter, but I'm not a good fan by any means.
Yeah, I think I would disagree. I think you're a great fan. It's odd. The only reason I watched it when it first came out, besides like being a fan of the NBC lineup, I love Chevy Chase. I liked Chevy Chase. I knew of him obviously. I was like, oh, Chevy Chase. I remember like liking Joel McHale, but not like knowing a ton about him. But I was a huge Donald Glover fan, believe it or not, because of I love Derek Comedy. Derek Comedy was the first. It was the first thing I ever watched on YouTube, or like you said, I think that's the story I tell myself. Maybe remember early YouTube, it was mostly like videos from people riding on motorcycles in Russia and getting car accidents for the first year.
Or like video game remixes and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Yeah.
But I remember I was in college. I think I was in college, and Derek Comedy being the first YouTube video I ever like fell in love with. I think it was Bro Rape was probably the one that kind of
Yeah.
brought him out. Then I like, followed him and all those guys and DC Pierce and all those guys for I loved Mystery Team. I don't know if the timeline's up, but I remember watching the pilot of my dad at my parents' house, and then my I just started dating my now wife, and when we were living together, like that was like when we lived together with our roommate at that time, Megan. We would all sit down. That was like the show we'd watch. Like we all liked it, but it wasn't till that paintball episode we were just like, oh. Now that I go back and watch it again, I can see the brilliance of it earlier on, but I don't think until paintball did I really. And there are definitely some episodes before that. Paintball was I was like, what the actual fuck is this show?
Yeah, I think the chicken fingers episode,
Yeah,
um, that's
that's a classic.
American Poultry, is typically one that people point to as like really big hint at what this show could be.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
it really turns it up a notch for the Modern Warfare episode for sure.
Any of the moments with Jeff and Abed always really hit me the hardest. Like I know they don't ever come out and die, which I love that Danny Pudi's character. They don't ever flat out says he's on the autism spectrum, which I respect. But I've worked with that community and I have family in that community, so I just immediately was so drawn to the Abed stuff because you don't ever see characters like that represented on television that aren't like to quote Abed. Don't make this a special. Like
Yeah, for sure.
I also have this memory of that first year, my wife and I dating, and her family and I going to New York City for Christmas to see the tree, like everyone does. And she like snuck into the NBC store and bought me a Troy and Abed mug for Christmas. And like that moment, I was like, I think I'm gonna marry you, and I did.
Yeah, keeper. That's a
Yeah,
keeper for
I
sure.
know it's gonna be hard not to just talk about all my favorite episodes of the Community, but that's because it's the best show ever made.
Yeah, it's I mean, obviously I'm doing this podcast and I wouldn't be you know 35 episodes into the podcast if I wasn't somewhat invested in in it. But
Yeah,
yeah, it's a great show and keeps on giving and what I love about it is the community of people around the show. And from what I've learned, the people who have made the show are really special and wonderful people as well. And so it just makes it even better.
that's I love the show for a long time. I don't know about you. I was like definitely a part of the Save Community campaign when it was a thing. I was like tweeting at that time in my life too. I had become a Nielsen rater for when they started doing for streaming, and I would literally just I would go to work and just leave Community on all day just to be like, gotta save it, gotta keep it going. Like I was just completely enamored with that show, and it's been so fun to kind of meet more and more people. Like you said, the community of Community is like when it came to Netflix, because it was on Hulu first, but it didn't get the fanfare that it did like when it went to Netflix. That's when I discovered your podcast, which then led me to all the other community podcasts. And what seemed so cool off the bat was that all of you all seem to be friends and not competitors.
Yeah, I don't. I'm not going to take credit for it, but I certainly feel like I've influenced that process. You have people like Matt and Mike who run the community's Twitter account, who I think are influencers as neutral parties, and they have the most followers, and they're the ones who've been around the longest, and that kind of thing. But early on, it would be a year ago now. When I saw some of the other podcasters starting, I just was like, they're all doing their own thing that's very niche, and they're doing rewatch podcasts, or just have a different perspective from who they are as a person. And I knew pretty early that like the only way that I was going to do this is if I could interview the writers and people involved with the show, because that's just the thing that interested me the most. Like, I want to know who wrote the joke that made me really laugh when I was in a bad place, and who wrote these stories and these characters. And I think that was pretty much in December when I first interviewed Andrew Guest, who was the first writer I talked to. And he, once I get that, it kind of unlocked everything for me. But to your point, it was quickly becoming clear that's what my show is going to be about. And I didn't want there to be a competition of like us trying to get, I don't know. I felt really drawn to the idea that this is a community. We're all accepted here for a reason. The show is called Community, and I just wanted to get to know these people as podcasters and creators far more than I wanted to, beat them to an interview or something like that. And
Oh, sure.
So, but one thing that I did was I started asking these other podcasters to come on and interview with me when I interview. So as early as I think back in April, I had Jen from the Community Rewatch podcast. She and I talked with Ken Jeong, and since then I try to have someone on the show with me from one of the podcasts when I talk to some of the cast and such.
I think that's so cool that, like, I mean, it's so, I mean, the irony I don't think is lost on you or anyone of that, like, it literally became our internet version of Greendale. Because, like, all the different podcast hosts, like, everyone comes into podcasting sideways because it's such a new, the industry itself, or podcasting's only been around, I think, 14 years, maybe 15 tops, I think. I want to
And
say 14.
even then, it's really just been taken
Yeah.
off in the last few years. I mean,
Yeah,
there are people who've been
especially.
doing it for 10 years.
Yeah.
Like, that's Wild West,
Oh,
the
yeah.
first 6, 7, 8 of those.
I started 7 years ago, and when I started, I remember it being like, "You missed the boom, kid. It's all over. Podcasting is done." And I was like, "Oh, okay, whatever. It's cool. I just like doing it because, like, so I think I have the same thing you have. Is I like to talk to and connect with the people who make the art that I love, and then things kind of went. It's morphed into something different than I first originate my original idea, which I'm really proud of. But it's a real it's a little dirty secret that it's a great way to trick people into being your friend, or at least talking to you, because like I'm not someone who wants to meet a celebrity, and I don't, maybe this says more of me, but like I don't want to just meet a celebrity and get a picture. Like I'm like I just like want to connect with people, famous or not, with everyone. But like I'm like, well, I don't know, I'd rather have a moment or an experience with another human rather than like a quick hello. So the podcast is a great way I've gotten to kind of, I sometimes, it's not the right word, but it feels that way, that sometimes I've tricked people in who have met a great deal of amounts of like from childhood or youth, and I've always had a lot of interest in a lot of different, like I come from like the punk rock community, so some of these people weren't like famous to anyone, but to me it's like this album changed my life, or this cartoon or this movie, and getting to talk to them has been, it's the fucking greatest. And now, what was your, is this your first podcast you ever did?
Yeah.
No background in like radio or anything like that?
No, I had 2 episodes that sucked that I took off the internet that you can still find out there, but they're just me kind of talking about the show, the first 2 episodes. And, I did a little editing and added some, interspersed some, clips from the show to kind of highlight some points. But, No, I quickly was like, I had a friend who was like, hey, I'd love for, to talk with you on this podcast. That was my warm up. Then I found a blue check verified fan of Community on Twitter, and I was like, um, he is a DJ for a radio station, so he's super polished. It was great. So I interviewed him, and then I just went right into talking with people from the show.
Is this your personality outside of the show?
Um, yeah, I mean, I think so. I don't think I put on airs. I think what I try to come across in the podcast, it's I try to be a little witty. I'm witty. I don't know that I'm like funny.
I think so.
Well, thanks. I mean, I think I'm better at being witty than I am funny, like outright and out. But I try, I guess.
I don't know about you, but I've had this experience more than once that like I'll be in a social situation and be like not knowing what to say. I'll be like pretend I'm doing a podcast, and it's helped a lot at times. Like I mean, this is I think I'm always me on the podcast, but I like to think I'm the presenting the best version of myself. Hopefully, uh, this is the slice of. And also, I'm like usually happy and excited because I love talking to people. So I'm like, yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm
yeah,
not always happy, but like sometimes I don't know. I do you ever? I know you're far a little farther in. You're far in now. Like, do you ever like look back and be like, why the fuck did I think to do that? But not like in a bad way, but like for some reason, like I should start a podcast and I should interview Joe McHale and Dan and Ken Jeong and Megan Gans and all these amazing people, Danny Pudi. I mean, I won't go through your list, but people should listen because you've had some incredible people. And like, you're not from the. I don't know why I did it either. I'm glad I did. I always just look back and like, that's so weird. Like, why did I do that? I don't know where it comes from because other parts of my life I don't feel this comfortable or confident, or maybe I do more now. But when I first started, like that wasn't the case. I always find it so interesting. It's one of those things like I've quit a lot of hobbies, but this I tried to quit this, couldn't do it.
yeah. Here's the thing. I think deep down, I really do like talking with people. It's always been something, I've just been drawn to people and radiate from that energy of like, being witty and funny and like making them laugh and getting them comfortable. And that's what I feel like if I do anything on these episodes is that I feel like get people comfortable that like, most of the time pre-roll, I just talk about how my grandfather was in the business and, so like
What did your grandfather do?
what's that?
What did your grandfather do?
Oh yeah. So he was on a couple TV shows as well as in about 40 movies. He was the next door neighbor Thorny on the TV show Ozzie and Harriet,
Oh my
and
God!
and then he was Mr. B on the TV show Hazel.
Oh, that's
And
right. That's so cool.
yeah, so he was the TV Academy president for a couple of years and has a Emmy nomination from Ozzie and Harriet, and then an actual Emmy that the Academy gave him for being president. So
Is that your mom or your dad's dad?
my mom's dad, and but my parents grew up in L.A. Mom's from Brentwood and grew up in amongst royalty and that kind of stuff. So
Also, to her, that was like nothing then.
well, she would say high school was like this. There is always someone with a more famous parent.
Yeah, I one of my
There's a hierarchy to it.
yeah, my buddy, a friend of mine, grew up in Beverly Hills as well, but his parents were like caterers, so all the stories were so cool to me because I grew up in Connecticut, and he's like, dude, nobody cares when you grow up. It's like it's normal to see like I don't know like John Travolta out getting pants or whatever. Like, but like for me, I'm like, oh my god, it's so cool. But he's like, yeah, it's not that cool. But like anything, you just kind of get used to it. Did you grow up in L.A.?
I grew up going out to LA a ton. So we just my brother and I went back this last November, and it just brought back all these memories of all sorts of things. And we visited my grandfather's star on the Walk of Hall of Fame. And
Oh, that's so beautiful. And what? How cool is it that like you're not in show business? No, you. I mean, this is show business now. Like maybe you were like you didn't become an actor, but now like there's a way you're connecting with Grandpa without actually. It's cool. Like my dad does a college radio show for a long time too, and it's like oh, it's sweet. It's like never. I'm sure. Well, of course, I'm sure your grandfather never be like one day you'll do a podcast because they didn't exist 14 years ago.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Like I never really got to talk to him about this. I think it was 14 or so when he passed away, and so this is a bit of a journey to understand the business. Leonard from the show, Richard Erdman, he was in a movie with my grandfather back in the day.
Have you got to interview him yet?
He's dead. He passed away.
Oh, he did, Leonard.
Yeah,
Oh, I didn't know that.
a couple years ago. So
Oh,
that's so there's like some sadness to like not being able to connect some dots in my life, and
yeah.
but I think the point I think we were talking about is that I find there's comfort that I get with guests, and just through those conversations, and through the kind of the rapport that I can build, and did I think I would be doing this? The reason I'm doing this is because of a lot of trauma in my life and experiences where I felt my voice was taken away and didn't
You're
have a
preaching to the
chance
choir.
to really express who I was. And
Oh yeah.
I'm a creative person who grew up playing in bands and those kinds of things.
What
And
kind of music?
I, rock and roll. Radiohead was big. Jeff Buckley, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, nice.
Cool rock and roll type of stuff. And
Are you a therapy person?
am I in
Like, do
therapy?
you see? Are you like
Oh
someone
yeah.
who
Oh
goes
yeah.
or
Oh
pro
yeah.
therapy? Yeah, I work in that. I work in that field as well as love. I saw my therapist yesterday, and it was wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. That's a huge part of a return to, but used to be involved in a religion, and just saw it as it just blew up, and we have things like the election and different, just varying, I don't want to get too political or too into these weeds, but when you have a paradigm, a worldview that gets shattered by inconsistencies, and especially with behavior, people accepting certain types of behavior, and just gets all thrown apart. And I was really grasping for a way to find joy. And what I did was I watched a lot of Community. I listened to a lot of Dan Harmon's podcast.
Oh, Harmontown.
Harmontown was,
Oh, that's right. He's one of the first podcast people too. Like that early, a lot of and like I remember listening to Megan Gons on "You Made It Weird" with Pete Holmes way back in the day. Like she was one of those first people that wasn't famous, but I knew who she was because I watched Community. I saw her name, and then I would hear her on various LA those like certain sects of podcast.
yeah. And so the one podcast that I really, was I was in the process of like really getting into was called Whiting Wongs with Dan Harmon and Jessica Gao. Really interesting podcast about race,
Never
and
listened to it.
yeah, it's really really good. And Dan, it's just the proxy for kind of seeking, white guys who are seeking to like really correct their behavior and their thinking and their
Sure.
that kind of stuff. And so it was. I think all of that was kind of flowing, and then with the 10th anniversary of Community, I just was like, you know what, like I should just talk about this show and do this thing that I really love. And I always wanted to do a podcast because I kind of liken myself a talker a little bit, and I figured it can fill some space. And so, like I said, I did those first couple of episodes. It took me, I did it just literally sat down in my basement, and I just talked for like half an hour, and then I didn't do one for another month. It took me a month to do the next one,
Yeah.
and then I noticed other podcasters doing community podcasts, and I was like, all right, well, it's time to either like make this a thing or wait, or just get eaten up and get kind of in the cacophony of noise, like I'm going to just get drowned out. So anyway, that's kind of the little bit of the history. And
That's pretty cool.
yeah,
What faith did you grow up with?
yeah, I mean, in like a typical evangelical type of Christian background.
Mm,
And yeah,
it's tough.
it's tough, not just seeing people, I don't know, like it's tough when you see it like right now, and you see like the decisions that people are making from afar, that's one thing. Like you can, maybe you're not religious or maybe you're
I'm
not
not, but yeah.
evangelical, and you can just go like, oh, these fuckers are just totally anti, they don't see the hypocrisy. And but it's another thing when you're inside the faith and you are standing up for things. And yeah, I don't know, I'll just talk about it, it's fine. I there was a guy bringing a gun to church, and I was like, I'm sorry, what? I was like, why do you need to bring a gun to church? Like, what is the point of this?
Yeah.
Like, and here's the demographic, and nothing against, single white 20 somethings males, but like you're the demographic of people who kill people. Like, no offense, right? Like you're the demographic of people who do things without thinking because you don't have anything like a family. And so I have 3 kids, and you're bringing a gun to church,
Mm-hmm.
and like, oh, well, I'm doing it for self-defense, and I'm like, yeah,
Against
but like
yourself.
philosophically, you don't understand what happens if you kill my kid, like,
Yeah.
on accident. Like that's not better, and that's not a better option. So philosophically, we can say that's not the best outcome of the anyway. So it's just, there's lots of things. But anyway, long story short, I was alone in that opinion, and it was not handled well. It was not appreciated that I would even bring this up and make it in a deal about it. The fact that I forgot to leave, or I did leave out, was that I'm a gun victim of a gun crime victim. I was a bank teller and was held up at gunpoint 10 years earlier than this. And a guy in a paintball mask with a gun put it up to my head, and, very traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And
I'd say
no one
so.
asked me why I even had an opinion. They just assumed it was like this political thing. And it was like,
Liberal, whiny bullshit. Like,
yeah,
oh, I don't
exactly.
want to die.
Yeah,
My
no,
children to
I have
die.
kids, and a gun crime victim. And um,
And why do you need a gun in church? And if you're afraid of someone entering the church with a gun, it's probably you.
yeah,
Listen, I
exactly.
I have a
Statistically,
child, and I know, dude, I don't even trust my. It's like they're. I'm all. Well, this is not a guns right thing because we're all for guns rights, and safety and stuff. But like, I don't know who this gentleman is. But listen, I'm a moron for the most part. I lost my vape pen a minute before, like earlier. I don't want a person with all the best of intentions to accidentally just leave their gun laying around and my kid just shoots. Hey, we all saw the episode of The Simpsons, Who Shot Mr. Burns?
yeah, yep.
Probably not the best argument for the church, huh? They probably don't like The Simpsons.
the I mean, the other fact was that we have a state trooper who went to the church, and I'm fine with him carrying a gun.
Yeah, someone who's been trained and knows what they're
Yeah,
doing.
he was actually a guy who trained in the gun range, so he was
Yeah,
the guy who trained people to shoot. So I'm not against guns. I'm against
who's carrying
the
it?
audacity of someone to put their rights in the way of my rights.
Sure.
Just like I wouldn't, necessarily chain smoke cigarettes, right next to your family of 5 while we're outside somewhere. And, it's my right to be in a smoking section, but, like read the room and recognize when it's an appropriate time to exercise your rights. And anyway, so this went off the rails, and it's my fault. But
It should go off the rails. That's encouraged.
yeah, no, I mean, so like that's my point is all to this, that I had a lot of anxiety and turmoil that needed an outlet, and I just was like, community and Harmontown, these things were making me laugh. They were bringing me so much joy when I was feeling absolutely, um, ostracized from a community that I once thought was. I don't talk to any of those people.
So
10
sad.
years, and I don't talk to like literal people I was in business with, literal people that I was had known for 10 years, and I haven't talked to any of them.
It's a really sad thing, and people always whine about cancel culture, but it's not a new thing. Like shunning and all religious groups and every form of human society has some version of that. But it's I remember even thinking that as a kid, like when we would go to church when I was a kid, and like I think maybe someone would get like divorced, and then they get like excommunicated from our community, and just be like growing up, being a teenager, I'm like, how could you like people who were like, I was born with a heart condition. I had heart surgery when I was like 2.5 months. Like the same people who were like, and this wasn't my mom or anything, but like the same people who were so warm and kind to our family and brought us cookies and blankets and were there for you for thick and thin. We fortunately didn't have the same experience. I'm sorry that you had to have, but like you would see those people then just turn on someone they felt that way about. And I'm such a looker around of like whenever I know anyone who's doing so, I'm like if someone's doing something bad to someone else, they'll do it to you. So that's always like a red flag. And so it's always so interesting. These people can give you such love, and all of a sudden they can just turn your back like you never existed. It's like, we- but I mean, that's how I think anyone listening is also going to get. Like, I do see the irony that you lost your community and then found this community of the TV show and the podcast and stuff. And Community, the TV show, is kind of like, oddly in a weird way, is almost like it's like atheist church. It's for the misfits and oddballs and the people who want to have that connection without the religious aspect. And what Community, the show, did so well, that great scene where they all introduce each other, and Shirley's like, "Ooh, we all have a little bit of everyone." So you went to church a lot at Shirley's, I'm gonna guess, but Shirley being the redeemed in our episodes in our series.
Yeah, I mean, I think there were just a lot of people with good intentions. I think the bigger thing that I would take away is that there's just a lot of people who don't know how to deal with conflict.
I work in behavioral health. I had post traumatic stress as well. I've experienced that. But the reason I actually tried to quit the show is because of trauma, and then wasn't able to. And then but so I'm a case manager, but so similar to like a social worker. I've de-escalated people with when people are talking about defund the police and stuff like that. I do that job without a gun. I've literally talked people off ledges more. I've done all that, so it's like I don't know my point other than a gun doesn't help the situation like that person might think it is. That's the last thing you need in a heated situation is Yahoo bringing in a weapon untrained.
Yeah, and I think even once the issue was arisen and once there was like a faction, I was not alone completely. There was a couple people who were at least adjacent to their argument. There was also issues of concern about racial justice and other kind of similar types of what are we really doing? Is this place really a place that's for people or just for us? And there's a big difference between a place that's for people and caring and loving, and then there's a place for us, which is insular and a castle and protective. And I don't know. I don't think the faith is supposed to be that. And so
I'm sorry that happened to you, but like anything, the worst thing in your life will always turn into eventually will you can't see it when it happens, will turn into the best thing that ever happened to you. It's very Buddhist, but it's the truth though. Like it's kind of odd that if that had not unfortunately had that experience, like but now like, you're friendly with Ken Jong, who's mega famous. Or I don't know if you would say you're friends, but you're friendly. I don't know, but you've communicated with Ken Jong outside the podcast. Yeah, he's fucking famous, but apparently also a lovely human being, which is one of the cool things I love about your podcast and all of the community podcasts as a whole. That I love all of them is how much the cast and the crew. It's and I'm always a sucker for the people who make the thing love it as much as us who love it. Like I feel like Dan Harmon and maybe everyone besides Chevy loves Pup Community as much as us. Like you were aware of it. Like we made it, and they're like, yeah, this is great. I get that from The Office. I love The Office Ladies podcast. I get that sense from The Office. Like there's like a magic. Like I'm like, you're super fucking famous, Jim Halpert, but it's famous fleeting. Ultimately,
yeah, I think that's I've found that everyone is very grateful for not even for what it did for them professionally.
it always just seems personal whenever they all talk
Yeah,
on all the different
it
podcasts I
seems
listen to.
like it was a very unique situation where not not every cast, not every film, not every situation is as caring and thoughtful towards each other. Even though it was grueling hours and that kind of thing, it was really full of special people.
And it seems like you kind of I don't like a little a hint of like I can relate to Dan Harmon where like him on a much different level, but has done things that aren't great and then tried to rectify it and find the path toward the redemption, specifically with the stuff with Megan Gans, like with like kind of sexually harassing her, and then I thought he did a really great job apologizing. I think it was on Harmontown or something like
Yeah.
that.
Yes.
I'm a like Chris. I'm like Shirley. Like I always believe in a path to redemption. Like so, I think there's something about that I love that show, regardless of its problematic stuff or whatever the bad stuff behind the scenes or who was said or who fucked who or shitty things like that with Chevy. Like um, it's and I like it's kind of interesting too, like how much with abusive, not to call them abusive, but in an abusive relationships, usually there's great love and great abuse, and it's interesting to see like the community people talk about everything so openly about shit was not perfect. It was fucking hard, but like there's such love there and forgiveness for each other. It's beautiful. Like I love, man, some of the you've had some really great guests on. Like I still get blown away every time I look at. I'm like, you all the community podcasts, like from I mean, literally everyone, the cast, the crew. I
Yeah.
mean, are the Russo brothers the hardest to get down?
Um, Probably Donald before the Russo brothers. Donald would be harder
Uh,
than the hardest to
yeah,
get.
probably not. Yeah,
Yeah.
and not because I don't think he would do it. It's just there's a lot of layers to get to him, and rightfully so.
Yeah.
Because there's more than one of me trying to, I, more than just community podcasters are trying to hit up Donald.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd love to say, hey, oh gosh, dude, I can get you 5,000 listens, but he's like 5,000 listens. That's a big freaking deal.
Big
like
fucking deal, Donald.
So yeah, it's not like my podcast is breaking records, and it's certainly a niche thing, but yeah, no, I think we got Jim Rash coming up.
Oscar winner,
editing that. Yeah, Oscar winner Jim Rash we're just finishing up his edit on this week, and hopefully get that one out. So slowly but surely, it's not the there was a time period back in like February, March, April, when I was churning one out like every week almost. And that was a lot.
It takes time, man.
A lot of time, a lot of calls, a lot of setting things up, and now now I'm having fun, but
it's a lot of work.
It is.
I don't know why I didn't quit, but yeah, it's a lot of fucking work. I mean, it's a lot of reward, but like anything, it should be. Like there's parts of it I fucking like. To me, there's like this great quote from BB King, that he says like, "I play for free, I get paid to travel." And I feel like for me, like this part of the podcast is the playing music part. Like this is it's all work. It's like you were in a band. Being in a band is what 30 minutes to an hour of playing music and what, a whole fucking full day of setting up, breaking down, traveling. Like there's more. There's always a certain level of bullshit to ratio happiness, and thankfully my happiness level is higher than the bullshit ratio.
Yeah, that's actually one of the reasons why I've started to do more live streaming.
So easy.
Yeah, I'm just like, you know what? Let's see who listens. If it's a few hundred people, I'm happy. We'll answer questions. We'll have some fun. It's building the community, that kind of thing.
And I don't know about you, but we started like we have Let's Chat Live that I produce and rotate as a co-host, and it's a much younger generation watches people talk on the internet compared to like people who won't listen to a podcast, because podcasts generally be for a little bit older people. And, like the younger generations stream everything while doing something else, like passively, like on Twitch and whatnot. So I've been noticing that. Like, but yeah, doing the podcast has been. What about you? Like, I did it. Are you a Kevin Smith fan?
Enough.
Or
yeah,
Dogma?
not
Yeah.
a huge fan.
I love that line in Dogma about faith is like a glass of water, and sometimes it's half full, and you just need to fill it up. And I got that with podcasting to a point where I got sick. I don't want to say I got sick of just doing just the podcast, and then I ended up teaming up with my producer Bree and Bree and Chris Ball and other people we had come in throughout the times, and now expand and build it past it, but and it's led to doing some live stuff, and it's really fun. Like we did a Let's Chat presents a punk rock documentary filmmaker roundtable, and it was, which I know you and I are talking about doing a community roundtable as well, um, which I'm gonna hold you to that. But
Let's do it.
doing the live stuff, it was it's probably like being in a band. If you play guitar, eventually you jump on a piano. It was a different muscle, and it made me really realize how much I love hosting more than anything of the podcast. Like I think it's the thing I like the most.
Yeah,
Except
I agree. That's what I've found that it's been interesting being on this side of the conversation, and we've had some interesting things to talk about. But for sure, it's I would, when I get myself in a place where, okay, I know the person who I'm going to talk to, I set up the narrative that I want to, I write everything out, the questions and kind of my
mm,
transition points. And even then when we do these live streams, they all joke about, it's just funny. I'm like, I'm the one who brings it back to what we should be doing. You know, they all make jokes, they do their thing, but then I'll say, okay, now we're talking about this. And yeah, it's just, it's fun to be a host. It's fun to kind of keep things moving.
so you were the guy in the band who made sure you got there on time.
No, I was the
Oh,
bass player or the guitar player who just showed up. Um,
oh, that's funny. Now you have to do all the work.
Yeah, now I'm, but I think that's a big shift in my personality. From,
Same, because
yeah,
I'm much
from,
more of a show up. Where what are we doing? And then this kind of. I always said that the podcast is the first time I felt type A in my entire life, and this insane responsibility I felt to put out an episode every week to nobody, no financial, no financial incentive. I was like, gotta do it. I'll know, and I've never understood those things in my entire life until this happened.
yeah, I feel the same way. That's really interesting. I feel like there are other moments I felt type A. I've started a business, and with the community thing, I've um, done these community cards.
You made
Yeah,
those?
I made these. We're doing show and tell on.
Where can people find your merch?
Pretty much sold out of them. There's 3 left of the community hallway crawler game cards. They're collector's items. I'm only going to make 100 of them. I made 100, and but I made chaos community chaos theory dice designed after the TV show.
Where can people buy this stuff?
You can go to d4bgames.com. The letter D, the number 4, the letter B, games.com. There's some stuff. I think there's 3 games left, and I'm going to be doing another round of dice, I think, because I think people like them. And
Oh my god! Yeah, I have interviewed and become friends with this gentleman named Pat Edwards, and he does a lot of stuff. But he runs a D&D game on Geekly Inc. like every week. I'm sure that world of people would love these die. I think when he did the Red Opera was his like when he came on to promote. I don't know a ton about D&D, which is a perfect segue. What I did want to ask you about was the community D&D episode.
oh,
More importantly, your podcast and like how we were talking before, it's like say stumbling and then finding your path to redemption, if you will. I love what you did with those podcasts where you did it's your story. How about you tell us what happened?
yeah, I don't know what happened, other than
Not happened, but the what you know
it's
what
an
I'm talking about, but other
evolution.
people don't.
Yeah, it's an evolution. You know, I, as any guy, white cisgendered male, is, is, has opinions, and I wouldn't even say I don't think my opinion was totally wrong at the outset. You know, it's a very nuanced situation with this show, with this episode in particular. It's the D&D episode is one of my favorite episodes.
Oh, me too. It's great.
It's a great episode. You work in behavioral health. I have a couple diagnoses of my own, and um, very pro therapy, that kind of thing. And so the episode is near and dear because I can really see myself in Neil to a certain degree, at least the darkest moments.
Fat Neil.
Yeah, the darkest moments of Neil's, of how he's feeling and feeling othered and that kind of moment. And we get ruins. At this point, I think it's fair to say it's ruined by an untimely joke about with Chang in blackface or blackface adjacent, depending on what you wanted to call it.
I thought it was blue, but then that could have just been me or my TV.
It's really, really dark black.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
supposed to be a drow elf, and the joke is about blackface.
yeah.
It's a, and so what you're alluding to is that I've I've done I think 4 episodes now on D&D. So I originally had the Advanced Community Studies crew come on and share their thoughts, and I think the overarching opinion was that this is not necessarily blackface. It's commentary. It's not a good look, but in the big scheme of things, this isn't going to stop cops from killing black people. I think that was, I don't want to speak completely for everyone, but
Yeah.
I think that's one opinion. It was a mix. It was a group of people, and did not include any voices, especially a female voices, and especially black female voices. So when I put it out there, I had a community fan say, "Hey, this is great. Have you thought about having such and such voice?" She and I ended up DMing her, and we had half an hour long DM conversation. And I said, if you feel comfortable, let's chat on the podcast and let's talk. And so she was like floored that I'd asked her, and I was like, I don't know. It feels like the least I can do is you have an opinion and want to, it's not that you're speaking for every black woman out there, but it's going to be a perspective, and you're going to share your thoughts. And so we had Sheree on, and I adore her. We've had a great conversation. She's been on other podcasts I do, and I were friends in the internet type, and so it was an interesting evolution of conversations. And
Well, what I like about the story is not that you did anything wrong, but there are other people could have had that moment and say "fuck you" and then turn into alt-right Nazis. So you're like, oh, okay, let's expand this and let's bring. You literally did the opposite of what your church did to you and said, let's bring more people in and let's learn.
well, I mean, I'm not looking for pats on the back.
You're gonna get them.
Yeah, because I feel like what.
Yeah, we don't want, what's that called? We're not white. I'm
Yeah.
not white savioring you, but I just thought it was interesting because it was such there was that little period where, and it wasn't the Black Lives Movement moment wasn't even asking for all these things to happen. It was like the when George Floyd was murdered by that police officer, like the whole country took a turn, and a lot of companies were sometimes preemptively removing stuff. Like there wasn't a huge movement like take this off community. I understand why they did, but it was just one of those things of like, um, I like that you included more voices into that topic because it's not something I'll be honest, I didn't put it together either. And I still love that episode, and I think having more context to it, if someone wants to watch it, and if that's someone who's really passionate about that stuff, it's a great learning opportunity, and then you can still enjoy the episode.
Yeah, it's I think the if there's I don't want to use this word, but crime. If there's a crime in that episode, it's the complacency I have to watching and responding to Chang in the episode. Most as my white perspective, I go, oh yeah, all right, like. That's how I used to react. Like, oh, okay, and hardly remember it.
That was me.
Right. We focus on the rest of the episode, but I think now I have much more of a cringe and a I don't know if there's what the response is, the correct response is, other than I think a lot about it now. When I've watched that episode,
Yeah.
it happens, and I go, I think of. Then I had the third episode of that I met with the Go Greendale, Welcome to Greendale committee, which is Michael and Jillian and Sadia. And I think of Michael and Sadia, both who are Black. When I watch that episode, I think of them and I go, I can't not think of how it affects them. And I think that's where, like, you need to think about how it affects people. And
Yeah, and
that's some kind of incremental change to, okay, this has negative effects on people. Some people, not everyone who is African American viewed this as blackface or problematic, but there are plenty who did. And I need to not just, go, well, some of them don't. And, well, because I need to think of people who are hurt, because I want to think of anyone who is marginalized in any situation and feels othered and feels hurt. I've been in that place, not in the same way, but at least get a taste of it. I will never know because I'm a white guy, that kind of thing. But
one thing too that I think makes, I don't want to say it's okay. One thing that separates Community from doing it differently than the other shows is that it was an established show with an established diverse cast. And not saying it was right, but it'd be one thing if they did that and it was an all white cast. But there's also, there's something to the show. Like, it's not a pass, but it's a little more. There's more nuance to it because it's like, there's actually developed Black characters in that show. You know what I mean?
Not said only and
it's complex. It's much more complex than I thought.
Complexity is this. Shirley is like, hey, we're not going to do anything about this. And everyone goes pretty much with their silence. Nope.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what a lot of people had problems with.
And that's exactly how it happens in real life, which is such a teachable moment.
Right. And
oddly enough, that episode is more about like suicide and stuff too.
Yeah. It's about bullying, but hey, it's, then when I had Yvette on, she,
oh yeah, another super motherfucking famous person. You know how many people you've talked to that have been in Marvel movies?
Yeah.
I was just watching, I was watching Endgame, and she's in Endgame. I think, is she in Captain America as well?
I think just Endgame.
Is it just, yeah? I was watching her in Endgame, thinking about you last night.
Yeah, yeah. And so and she said, I think there is, we're at a place in time where we have a bit of an overswing, and that's okay. It was.
What a perfect way to put it. That's the perfect way to put it.
There's an overcorrection, and that overcorrection is a lot better than complacency and letting.
Yeah. And when it got put on Amazon, I think they kept it on there. It was kind of a flash in the pan moment where I think it was, but I respect that you did that because it put more nuance to that episode, which I didn't put together. Also because I haven't watched Community in a period of time before I came to Netflix, so I had not re-caught up to the Dungeons and Dragon episode when I saw. I was like, oh yeah. Can I ask you like more like inside baseball stuff, like start the podcast? And how did you learn how to book guests? And you've talked to some amazing people.
Sure, yeah, and I'll just wrap up with that last segment and say that personally it was a very moving and growing experience walking through those 4 episodes, and then I talked to Charlie Kuntz about it. So 5 episodes of we ended up talking.
Wait, Neil, that's right. Oh,
so I talked to Neil about it.
He lost mad weight.
Yeah,
I didn't put that together. That was the same guy. I follow him on Twitter. I didn't put together that was Neil.
Yep.
I have to go back and listen to that.
Yep. Episode. So Charlie Kuntz. So anyway, it was a lot of lot of thought and a lot of really just putting myself in a second place, in a side section where I just listen and absorb other people's opinions and other people's perspectives, and it just was a really good practice. I don't think that we do that enough, of sitting in other people's shoes, and not that I want to preach about it, but yeah, I mean, I think those are really 5 episodes where it's pretty fabulous that we got to talk about one episode of TV as much as we did.
It's the gift that keeps on giving. Like, they made a mistake. It wasn't the right thing to do in retrospect, but then look at all the growth that was able to come from it. It's the pendulum always swings. But yeah, I'm glad you wrapped that up. But like, yeah, so how did you learn to book guests? How did you learn to do all this shit?
I did a little bit of PR work because I'm in marketing, so I'm familiar with first of all just email etiquette and reaching out to some people and the best way of like pitching people and making sure that there's all the benefit in the world to them versus like I'm just asking for stuff and they're not going to get anything in return. So but honestly for the first one it was just mining Twitter for a little bit and finding the writers. And I had been early enough in the game where there weren't a lot of podcasts going out. So when I reached out to Andrew Guest, it was kind of like, yeah, sure, I'll do this. And then once we got into DMs, I was able to share my, a little bit of my backstory, my grandfather, and that kind of stuff. And again, I think that really helps cool people off to like the worries that like, hey, this person has industry connections. There's like a, oh, you're in the club factor to a certain degree. I'm not really, but
Whatever gets your foot in the door.
yeah.
I would argue, though, I think you might think that, but I think it's more people. It's like they feel a connection to you, and then
Yeah.
you can see it's like, all right, this isn't like we're gonna come on and we're gonna do gotcha journalism and be like, Andy Barbero said.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And I think honestly, once I did the Andrew episode and it was basically like, tell me about yourself and the episodes, and it wasn't like, tell me, is Dan really awful, or like I'm not ever going after I'm not hard hitting in that sense. I'm not Geraldo Rivera of podcasting. I don't. There are hard things that we've talked about in the course of this podcast, and we've alluded to different things, but I'm much more like yourself, which is I'm much more of a redemption story type of person, and I want to know when. And I want to talk about the things that are really positive. I want to talk about Andy Bobro's story about he's basically like 40 before he becomes a TV writer. I just turned 40 and I'm like, oh, you mean no, I can't. I personally probably couldn't be a TV writer, but there are people, he's the the flag bearer for people who are getting into the industry late. That's not late. That's still, whatever, but it's not like you're coming into, straight out of Harvard at age 22 and getting your shot on SNL. It's like, that feels like a quintessential story versus, doing it a little bit later in life.
I'm 36 and I've just started my own business, and I never a podcast business of all, and never ever in my entire life thought this would be my life. You know, this was never the plan, but I'm here for it.
Yeah. So I think the kind of dominoes started to fall once I did a good job with. I think I did a good job with Andrew. He wants to come on again, and then Hillary Winston, Zach Paez, Megan Gans, Andy Bobrow.
So you're
they
gonna
all
just
were like,
you're just gonna write down all these emails for us afterwards, right? No, just kidding. The number one rule of booking is don't fucking be an asshole and share people's shit without asking first.
yes,
Anyone
exactly.
listening?
Yep. And but then there's some other stuff that I've done some investigative work, and don't want to give too many of the secrets are out, but there are ways to get the manager or PR
IMDb Pro.
Okay, there you go. You got it.
I'm all about giving up the secrets.
Yeah, so I mean, I just use IMDb Pro, and probably 4 or 5 of the guests I got booked that way, and But once Ken came on, it made it really a lot easier for the others the cast to come on.
How did you get Ken through IMDb Pro, or is that DMs?
No, it was DMs. I had a kind of a friend of his from the show, Chris Brandon he worked on the sets for all 6 seasons. So he helped design and build the sets of the show for
Oh,
six
that's
seasons.
right. Yes.
Yeah, and Chris was friendly with Ken, and so I kind of messaged Ken. I said, Ken's pretty good at replying on Twitter. I said, "Hey Ken, you should listen to this episode with Chris Brandon. We talked about you." And he messaged me and then followed me and was like, very quickly was like, "Hey, yeah, that's so great. I've been listening to the podcast, and
That's
um,
weird.
I should." And I was like, "Yeah, do you want to come on?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." So very quickly he came on within a couple weeks, a week or so of when we got connected, and so it was just kind of being cool with the people that are in the industry or the space and on the show, and once they kind of trust that what your mo is and what you're trying to accomplish with the podcast, then um, you know
It's so cool to see all of the community orbit connect with the community podcasters as well. Like
yeah,
it's the opposite of the church that you lost, of like bringing it's becoming like our internet Greendale. And I don't know. Well, I mean, it's more your community than mine. I feel I'm a little bit more on the outside of it because I don't know the other folks other than from afar outside of Twitter. But like I guess you're like the one person I know. But it's nice. And then Ken Jong and Joel McHale started their podcast, so that must have really helped everybody simultaneously.
yeah, they were plugging 6 seasons in a podcast regularly on the podcast,
That's
which was cool. It was just like it was like, oh, Ken is has no reason to do this, and
another later in life guy.
yeah, sure, yep, yep. Yeah, and I love the community of people that we have in the podcasters. Kevin and Matt and Zach and Jen and Ben and all these different people that are. We have a podcaster Twitter group that we all talk on regularly, and yeah, it's fun. We do each other's podcasts now. Help each other out, and we all have something different to say, and I think that's but we're all definitely motivated for the same thing, getting the movie. And you know
What are the chances when the movie does happen? I wonder if they'll do the thing where they'll throw some of you in it.
say it again.
Like that will happen sometimes. Like people who are really champion and fandom of things, and then like a movie gets made. Like Gilmore Girls, they put in the Gilmore guys got to be a little in the Gilmore Girls reboot. So maybe there's a small chance that all you guys will get a little background role.
If anyone's listening, I am on the next plane to LA or wherever I need to be.
You got a doctor on set, so you'll be safe.
Yep. No, I would love to do that. If nothing else, from all of this, it feels like I've created. I'll call them relationships. I won't know if I'm not saying I'm friends with any of these people, but I feel like um, most of the people that I've talked to would be willing to do a second interview easily. And yeah, I've had a great time with people. There's always the feedback has always been really positive, and the feedback from the fans has been really positive. People really just love hearing the background story to how these folks got to the show and what their opinions about the show is, and so yeah, it's been pretty fabulous.
So kind of start to wrap it up. I definitely before we I last thing I definitely wanted to ask you about the holiday episodes. It definitely was. Um, I don't have anything to say other than they're so great. Does Abed's uncontrollable Christmas last scene make you tear up as well?
It's a good one.
Do you have any moments as a community that make you cry, like get the little weepies?
Probably the very end. Um, I'd have to really think about it. I think that's one of the reasons I like the show when I like the show. Like, it doesn't get me too like sad, which is a helpful thing for me.
Yeah, yeah, very prone to sadness. That's not helpful.
Right, like I'm already hitting those cylinders pretty well. If I want to go watch something that makes me sad, I'll go watch The Leftovers, and
I haven't watched it, but I know it's so sad.
amazing show. And
Depressing as
I
fuck.
watched I watched that during the same period of time. I've watched that show twice, and I watched it in a similar time period of watching Community and all this, and uh, incredibly depressing, sad show, but also kind of happy at sometimes. But yeah, very very sad. Deals with a lot of with loss. So I think that's why I always like Community, because I don't know that I like. Yeah, it's sad when Troy leaves, but I'm not like, the dirty secret about Alex and 6 seasons of the podcast is that I'm not like rah rah Troy and Abed. I know that like freaks people out, but
Trying out in slow motion.
it's I love them. I think they're great. They have a chemistry for sure, but I would argue like Troy has chemistry with everyone. Abed has chemistry with everyone, and there's an episode like in 110 episodes, Troy and Shirley share one story together.
Wow.
So like, I just think there was opportunity to like mix up the pairings a little bit more, and that pairing in particular. And I'm sure if that's the one that I know off the top of my head, but I'm sure if you did some math, you would see, you know, there's there's probably not a lot of. I mean, there's a couple Troy or a couple Abed and Shirley episodes, but you know, just in general, Shirley gets the shaft quite a bit from the show. So, uh, yeah, so there's not a lot that gets me sad. And there's just a whole lot that really makes me laugh, and that's what the
Yeah.
show really is helpful for.
I think the Abed's. It doesn't get me sad like depressed cry, but more of just like I don't know. There's that last scene where they're all on the TV together. It always just gets me. That really warms. Like, hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think the third episode with Abed's introduction to film, where Abed and his dad are
Oh God.
at the dad crying, Iqbal crying. Yeah, that's probably like a moment where it's unexpected and is emotional. So yeah, I think the show surprises you, and I think there's moments.
Fucking jokes later. There's always one joke in that I never ever understood, and it's in the epidemiology Halloween episode season two, and as Jeff goes, Flava Flav was right. And I never knew what he was referring to. It's like some deep cuts community public enemy joke where like he goes to make a phone call, he's like Flava Flav was right, and they move on. I'm like, what is that? It's like such a deep reference. I'm like, what? One day I'll figure that out. If I ever talk to Dan Harmon or anyone, I'll ask them. Actually, if you ever talk to Dan Harmon, you can ask. When you talk to Dan Harmon, you can ask him for me.
It's still happening. I've been assured.
Everything is always still happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, COVID definitely messed a lot up. So I mean, I think
It's been made booking a little. It made some people more available. There was a good window right when COVID hit, where some people I don't think I should have had access to were a lot more available to talk to me. It's like,
yeah,
Okay.
and as you know, once guest begets guest, and once you're just able to put so and so's been on, that it's the game changer.
yeah, yeah. Exactly. That's the kind of the story of this podcast. So
That's great, man. Oh, I can't thank you enough for all your time and all and everything. And how did you find? How did we connect? I don't actually remember. Was it just Twitter?
yeah, I think it was just kind of like you were, obviously in the community space.
I found your show first of all the community podcasts. Yours was the first one I found.
I don't really get
Yeah,
to. I've
and we
only talked
just kind of
to.
like, oh, yeah, I like this guy.
Sounds about right. Because I've talked to, I've only people I've talked to, maybe two people. Well, one hasn't come out yet. Who have had any community involvement at small levels? Like I interviewed Reggie Watkins, who was in the apps episode with Mitch Hurwitz is in it, and then in a coming episode, John Myers, who worked on the sets in season 6. But I haven't. I should really try to get some community people on it. It's a passion of mine that it kind of like like most things, you love it and then you just don't watch it for a while, and then when it came to Netflix, I just started getting really reinvigorated into it. I think I'm gonna go watch some holiday episodes after this ends. Every year I watch all the holiday. It always happens every year. My wife, I will watch the holiday episodes, and then all of a sudden you're doing a rewatch of like the first 3 seasons. So then I jump around for 4, come back for 5, and I actually don't think I've ever finished 6.
Oh wow, have you never seen the finale?
No, not Community's fault. ADHD and concentration and sitting are not my strong points, so it's very easy for me to get sidetracked. Things change. But, oh man, so where can people find you online?
Oh, if you want to, 6 seasons and a podcast is on Twitter and Instagram at the letter 6, the number 6. Jeff Goldblum, that one. The number 6 seasons podcast. That's the @ but before that. So 6 seasons of a podcast. You Google it. It comes up, number one thing. There's a website and all that jazz. Find us on Spreaker or iTunes or Spotify, that kind of thing.
What about your merch store? You have some dope merch.
Yeah, you have to search for it, but I made some t-shirts. Those are pretty cool. I've got there's like 3 of these community hallway crawler games. So they're like, it's a dungeon crawler, like card game with 125 cards. It's pretty cool. It's an 8-bit design card. And there's like, I think in the original art, there's probably 70, 80 different characters from the show. Everyone from Jeff to a German exchange student to Carl and Richie and the Ass Crack Bandit, that kind of thing. So had an artist make the 8-bit versions of them. So
that's so cool, man. It's been great, and now I feel it's so cool to learn your backstory of why I just wasn't what I expected. So I think that's what makes podcasting so cool. We all come here for some reason or another, and they're always so different, but it's an interesting path we all end up on.
Yeah. I'm glad I kind of shared the story with you. I've alluded to different pieces of it, but I'm glad we talked about it. I think there's out of tragedy, out of trauma can come some really beautiful things, and that's what I'm hoping that this podcast has been a really good thing for people. And keeping them excited and their spirits up and something to have fun with.
So we'll look for you in the 6th season and in a movie in the future.
I would love it. I'm open.
Awesome, man. Then make sure. Awesome. Thank you so much, and have a good rest of your night.
You too. Thanks, Chris.
Why, hello there, podcast friend. I'm Ash Blodgett, co-host of the podcast Let's Rewatch. Together with my co-host and Red Opera D&D campaign writer Pat Edwards, we made a short film in quarantine called Joining Call. And it's finally coming out. The film is the story of a group of people trying to get together to play D&D via a video chat. But all the usual quarantine issues get in the way, such as kids.
Daddy, is this Game of Thrones?
Bobby, what are you doing?
Daddy,
No, come on, it's bedtime.
Poor internet connections.
Thou must cast ye techno devils from thine magic picture box.
Couples at each other's throats.
I want to blow some ogres up with a fireball.
Why is your first instinct to always kill things?
And more.
Zoe, stop drinking.
Oh, that reminds me. I haven't had the boss yet.
The film basically takes a snapshot of what life is like right now through the lens of nerds. So join us on our quest November 20th over on my YouTube channel, Laugh-TV, for the film's premiere. You can get there by going to youtube.com/laughstashtv. And that's stash as in STASH. Till then, I'll just be over here practicing my nat 20s. Ooh, critical hit.